paths to get there. So some of the implications and aesthetics for what this style of work might look like, the multiple storylines are just an invitation to the guest. The designers of the games should assume that they're only going to get one crack at the guest. They're going to make one choice and they're never going to play the game again. Every narrative path, every ending needs to be equally satisfying to the guest. It needs to be, you need to basically present your absolute best stuff at all paths at once, as opposed to saving the very good stuff for one path and, you know, putting your sort of B-grade stuff on a less attractive path. There's also the sense that these two branching narratives, that could mean, the fact that they're independent could mean, could have a lot of variety. You could either have them go in completely different directions, where the goal is to explore the space of a world. You could have like the experience of a prince versus the experience of a pauper. Alternately, you could focus on more or less the same narrow path, but stumble over and over again, or be confronted over and over again with the implications of the choice that you've made. So because you chose a certain way, people interact with you differently. You meet the same characters, but they act towards you differently. It's there's a lot of intrigue, and there's a lot of room to play in between those two extremes. So it does offer a lot of room for play in design. Finally, and most importantly, there's the sense that it's sort of related to the first point. There is no right and no wrong path. It isn't that you've done something wrong and you're setting down one set of one narrative, as opposed to doing right and getting down another one. There's no right ending. This is something where this is a style of game where the choices that you make are morally equivalent and need to be represented as such. I mentioned the Norman Conquest in passing earlier, and I think it offers an interesting model to study for this style of game. The Norman Conquest is a sequence of 3 plays written by Alan Ayckbourn in 1974. They are able to be performed as a sort of unit, where you have all 3 plays that are performed back to back to back on a given night or something like that. The idea is that all 3 plays are set in various rooms in a house. And so the action of one play takes place solely in the dining room, and another play takes place solely in the living room. It's the same characters and the same sort of plot line that happens or the same set of circumstances motivates all 3 plays. And yet, if you experience all 3 plays, you get a lot more definition for exactly what's going on. You get a better sense of who these characters are, and it goes so far that in one of the plays, the ending that you end up with in that one more or less repudiates the endings of the other 2. The actions that you thought were happening in the other 2 plays, really, it turns out that in one of the plays, its ending ends in a pretty different place. The point of them is that you can experience any one of these plays and be pretty satisfied with the world of the work and feel like you've got a pretty good experience. It's a pretty interesting, dramatic work. But you take all 3 together, and it deepens and broadens your experience of the world and of these characters. So it's an interesting model for games to look at. So to wrap up, I wanted just to discuss sort of the potential that I see for multipath games. First of all, it's a strong idea conceptually, because you, first of all, do find a distinct point on the triangle. You have, in some sense, these games are pretty similar to Zelda and Psychonauts and straight narrative-based games, but they make an important step towards the transformative ideal in being able to embrace multiple perspectives and multiple existences within the world of a work. It also, practically, the style of game does sound like it's fun, or would be fun to play, at least to me. And that's also important. I think this has the capacity to build a game that isn't just an experiment. It also could be intriguing and fun for an audience to play. And I think this also represents, again, as the form of narrative video games reach maturity, it offers a chance to define what it is that's uniquely enjoyable about video games as they enter the canon of accepted forms of narrative, of storytelling. We have the capacity, I think, through this form to get closer to what it is that video games can do that no other form of media can. And this offers a vision for the long term, a style of game that I think could be satisfying to audiences everywhere. So, that's the end of my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions.
You talked a little bit about perception and as a way to change the gameplay, and I wonder what the research there was on this topic, because I play a lot of games that I like. Change rather than changing the ending, change more of the perception of what is happening. And you know, I think it's a much cheaper thing to do in regards to content, because you don't have to create a whole new area or whole new characters. For example, like Silent Hill 2, you finish it, like, you know that you're the guy, you're looking for this girl. Something happened to her. You don't know what happened. Then you finish it a certain way, you're saving her. Because she's sick. You do this other thing, you made her sick, so you feel guilty. So I wonder if there was any research on this area.
Sure. The Alba's question, as I understand it, is a question of if it's more practical just to implement changes in perspective within a given work, rather than going to the extremes of mapping out entirely new worlds. I think that's a very reasonable point. I think that, for my money, I mean, you had in Silent Hill, yes, sort of. I mean, it was sort of the same ending, the same narrative structure, and yet you're right. There was a lot of variation within the work, and you're right. Your perspective changed a great deal. I feel like that is something sort of similar to what it is that I'm arguing here, and I think you have the capacity if you create. It's an intriguing work in that sense, and you have the capacity to tweak that structure slightly and make it into something that, I mean, the ending is interesting to Silent Hill. I think you could do more, and you could vary more, even if it is just within the perceptive model. I think you could do some interesting stuff and take those ideals that are represented there even further. But I think that is a good example and an interesting game.
Because I think like a lot of these games that offer total customization have very little at the core. So maybe like a balance of it makes for a more personal experience.
I think that's very true. Jen, yeah.
With the rise of